What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another Brand Doctor live stream. Today's topic in the What Would You Do If series is, what would you do if your industry is evolving extremely fast, but you're not? We've laid out a couple of key points and a couple of action steps that anybody that's running a business could pick up and run with and get into the new year quickly so that they could adapt to that change and not get swept out to sea. So before we get started, guys, I just want to, again, introduce the brand assessment product for you. It's more of a service than a product. This is for small business owners that are stuck when it comes to their brand's messaging. They may have some outdated brand identity that they need some tender love and care to maintain that and stay relevant. We'll talk about that in a second. Or you're so overwhelmed that you don't know what trigger to pull to help you get ahead of the curve and start putting out the right products, the right messaging, the right services to your ideal clients. We discover all of these challenges in this assessment, and then I sit there and work out with you the best solution, whether it's me or somebody else, on where to get started. But for me to tell you, oh, you need a new website, or you need a funnel, or you need this, or you need that before this assessment, in my opinion, that's malpractice. I cannot diagnose I can't prescribe without diagnosing the issue first. And so without that diagnosis, I am useless to you. So this is why this is part of my process, is this assessment process, to see where you're at, see where you want to go, and seeing where the issues are in between that we can help you overcome. So you could book that assessment through that URL right there. So let's talk about today's topic, Oase. This one is, I know, super dear to your heart. You were certainly a catalyst to talking about this on one of our live streams. So I said, you know what, let's tee this up nicely for Monday. So what's one of the big problems when it comes to a rapidly evolving market and we're not keeping up to speed?
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest thing is that, you know, you're under threat now of becoming commoditized, meaning that you're now only going to be competing on price, not a differentiator.
Right.
Stuff that we talk about week after week after week. And what'll happen? You'll be on a downward slope to competing on price until you've completely gone out of business.
Yeah.
On the other side is that your industry becomes so disrupted that your services or your products are no longer needed.
Right. And I feel like as years go by, that time frame, that slot gets smaller and smaller.
Yeah, it does.
Right. I want to give a huge shout out to Michael Faber. Mike Fabe's in the house. What's going on, dude? Henry always dropping value. We got Bob Boniol in the house. We need not get surprised. It's something that we do every day, education on the state of the art industry change. At least half of my day is spent on educating myself.
Exactly.
Dude, yeah. You're not the only one. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. We got Olio in the house. What's going on, dude? So yeah, you know, I'll give you my personal experience with this stuff. You know, when I see market disruption, I'll be honest with you, my first knee-jerk reaction, I get paralyzed, I get overwhelmed, and I get scared. I'm just being honest, right? Because I'm like, oh shit, something else I got to learn, something else I got to do, something else. And you know, it's funny. I get all worked up until I take my first step into immersing myself into that new thing, whatever it is, whether it's the metaverse, whether it's NFTs, whether it's cryptocurrency, right? And then each step gets a little faster, gets a little easier, and I get to get a better understanding each video I watch, each article I read, each podcast I listen to. And next thing you know, you're 20, 30 hours deep into a new topic, and not to call yourself an expert in it, because there's plenty to learn and continue to learn. But now that anxiety, that overwhelm, that feeling of paralysis subsides very, very quickly. So I know that that's coming. Like when I first heard about the metaverse, when I first heard about NFTs, I was like, oh boy, this one's going to be a whopper. Right.
And how many times have right. And how many times have I said, I was like, hey, look, you know what? It could very well be that we're no longer building websites in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is I'm so happy that Bob Bonio's here. He's like neck deep into, NFTs and the metaverse. I mean, hell, he's got an extension of his business called Meta Mode, and he creates these experiences. It's amazing. So after the new year, we're definitely going to have Bob on this show to talk about what he's doing with his business and how his business evolved over the years. And he is a great resource when it comes to NFTs and metaverse and all that stuff. So we're going to pick his brain after the new year. He already said he'd be down to come on the show and share some of his learnings and share some of the stuff that he's doing. So that's going to be fun. So Bob, I appreciate you for that. Thank you for that. And we look forward to that, because I'm sure there's a lot of other people besides me that want to learn from you. So another big thing that we have to pay attention to is, staying relevant with your customers, with the changing patterns of the marketplace. Like, we're designers, we're branders, are we going to be, like always said, designing websites 2-3 years from now? Or is that going to be the equivalent of an 8-track? Or is that going to be the equivalent of a cassette player?
Yeah.
or a cassette tape?
Or in marketing and advertising terms, I mean, we were talking about this offline, where things were being marketed, or products or services were being marketed through newspapers, right? Yeah. At one point, it was through newspapers. Then you had the advent of radio and television. Then it was on in radio and television. Mm-hmm. In the last 10 years, and like you were saying, that timeline in between has shrank so much that now in a matter of 10 years, you have businesses that have completely shifted their ad budgets to digital. Yeah.
I mean, I could give you a quick example of last year when COVID was running rampant. Yeah. It's like a digital gold rush. Yeah. to my agency, because everybody realized how unprepared they were. Yeah. To go online with their
business. Those were the business, and I want to remind people this, particularly in the audience, that the ones that came to Henry or the ones that came to me were still the ones that recognized that there's going to be a need for change. Uh-huh. Then there were some, or I would say there were quite a few that were still resistant to change. Uh-huh. They're like business as usual. And their businesses have either they're no longer existent, or they've shrank to the point of being non-existent in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick example on that too. So one of my buddies, he owns a huge event design company, right? He does a lot of weddings, right? When COVID hit and everything shut down, he had a competitor that had all of this lounge furniture that they use for wedding design, right? And his competitor said, I don't know how long this is going to last. I'm liquidating everything. So my buddy literally paid probably pennies on the dollar and scooped up all of that inventory. He had a place to store it all. He weathered the storm. Now he has unbelievable resources to create some kick-ass event design. So there's two mentalities right there, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to point that out. I'd rather be like my buddy, see the opportunity and strike, rather than be the guy that's liquidating because he feels like there's no end in sight.
Exactly.
Sometimes you get caught with your pants down and you have no choice. That's not going to be me.
No.
Okay. That's not going to be me. Looks like Bob here says, yeah, we hired Henry to build out a funnel the moment the pandemic hit. Yeah. I mean, Bob is very, very proactive with this stuff. And he says doubling down on.
There you go. You got to double down. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in these times, there are two types of business owners: the ones that are proactive, that will take the steps, or the ones that will delay it more and more and more, and they'll react emotionally in order to survive or in order to save their business when it's now underwater.
Yeah.
So,
well, listen, you guys might have heard this story already, but we're going back, Jesus, probably 8 years now. When Fiverr came out, I kind of ignored it. I was like, nah, it was the elephant in the room. But I completely had my horse blinders on until it started to catch up to me. And it literally almost sunk my business. And just to keep the lights on, guys, I became a Fiverr designer. And then this woman dragged me through the mud, 6 hours worth of work for a $5 two-sided business card design. And I was like, this ain't sustainable, but I felt the pain by putting myself through that. And I realized this isn't going to work. I need to change. I need to figure something out. So I stopped focusing in on what I didn't want, and I started focusing in on what I wanted, right? And that's what got me into the specialization of sales and marketing funnel design. And that was I'll call it the savior that got me out of being turned into a commodity by Fiverr. Now, here I am immersing myself into funnel design and funnel marketing and architecture, learning from the best like Russell Brunson, spending my hard-earned money on his coaching and getting around different experts in that space. And again, just getting as much of my feet wet as possible in that world until I was pretty much one of the best. I like to say the best because I don't want to let my ego get too big, but one of the best at one point in time funnel designers in the industry. And that's where I started to really build a reputation for myself. But again, this is what I did. I wasn't afraid to make that jump into a sea of newness. I remember I was in a Facebook group. You guys will laugh. I was in a Facebook group, like, when you get into a Facebook group or into a new industry for the first time and you're like lurking like hell, you're not commenting on anything, you're not even liking anything. And I remember these people talking about upsells and downsells. And I was like, what is an upsell? I don't even know what that is. You guys are speaking a different language. I had to Google it. I literally had to Google what the hell an upsell was, right? It's all part of the process, guys. I heard something this morning, when you start something new, you put a lot of pressure on yourself thinking that you're going to be awesome at it right out of the jump, right out of the gate. That's so far from the truth. Like you think Oasis and I were awesome designers the first time we opened up Photoshop and started playing around? Oh my God. I would crawl into a hole if you guys saw some of my early work. It's embarrassing. But it's embarrassing. But that's how I became the designer that I am today. You think my first live stream was awesome? Oh my God. I made a lot of people cringe when I jumped online for the first time. I'll tell you that.
Hey, you know what? For me, that's even more recent, right? I mean, I started joining you on all this stuff like earlier this year or in April.
Mhm.
But before that, by every single attempt, man, I mean, it was cringeworthy, at least for me. I think someone else, anyone else might be a little less critical of it. But man, I struggled with that. But
Yeah.
again, to your point, yeah, that first version is never going to be the best version. But it's the continuous reps.
And you're familiar with this quote by Amy right here, right? I've heard
Embrace
you
the
say
suck.
that. I've heard
Yeah,
you say that a few times.
absolutely,
Yep.
absolutely, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're about halfway through the live, and I want to start to give you the meat and potatoes of today's topic, and that's how to adapt to industry change. What are some things that you need to start doing immediately? What are some things that we've done in the past to stay relevant, to stay ahead of the curve, to stay a non-commodity, if you will? First and foremost, guys, and then, how about this away? So I do one and then you do one. I do one and then you do one. All right.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I want you guys to start paying attention to is anticipating your buyer's needs. Very, very important here. Now that you know NFTs are growing rapidly, now you know that the metaverse is here and it isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Now you know that big brands like Nike and Adidas and what are some other big ones?
NVIDIA, Adobe,
Yep,
Google,
yes,
Facebook, of course, right?
they're
All of these
all
guys.
gearing up for this metaverse. What are your customers going to need in order to play in that realm? That's something that I would start focusing in on immediately. Like, and if you're not doing this now already, I'm not going to say you're too late, but you're a little behind. It's the reason why we're doing this live stream today.
Yeah.
Is to get you prepared. All right, give me another one, Awais.
All right. Anticipating your buyer behavior. What are they going to be thinking? Where are they going to be at? And how are they going to shift? And I'll give you an example. A very recent example that's fresh on our minds is still COVID-19,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it was already projected. McKinsey put out a study a couple of years, or I would probably say like 12 to 18 months before that, where it talked about how the buyer behavior would completely shift and consumers would make most of their buying decisions online. And they were talking about specifically about the B2B consumer. I mean, you already had the B2C businesses that were already marketing, and a lot of the B2C consumers were already leveraging the digital to actually make their purchasing decisions. But B2B buyers weren't necessarily there yet. But that trend shifted, and it shifted dramatically as soon as COVID hit, and it was already projected, right? It was already projected that things are going to shift in that direction. So that was one where again, if you were already prepared for it as a business, meaning you already had a website up, maybe you had your inventory up there, or you had systems in place where buyers can actually even make purchases directly off your website. That was one piece of it. Or there were a lot of businesses, I'll tell you, over here in Houston, we've still we had a lot of businesses that were just going as just doing business as usual.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, okay, well, we don't really need a fancy website. We don't need something. It looked like there was, it was built back in the 90s, tail end of the 90s or 2000s, and it just wasn't, they just were not up to date with their digital presence.
Yep.
And so, of course, that did impact their business. That did impact their business performance, and it ended up shrinking their business or putting them out of business.
Yeah.
So anticipating your buyer behavior is big.
Well, here's a great question from Bob, and I think, man, this could be a whole episode in its own. What is your tipping point trigger for a big investment to respond to the market moving? It's a really great question.
In the wallet, the minute it hits my clients in their bank account, the minute that they start seeing either stagnation in their revenue
Yep.
or in their sales,
Mm-hmm.
The ones that are astute, the ones that are rapidly or they're very proactive, they are immediately acting on it. They're immediately making that change.
Yeah. So I'll give you my answer to this. When I start to see some of the industry leaders pivot their focus into a market change, I my ears start to perk up and I start to get laser focused. The other thing I'll do is I'll start to look at competitors on social media. I follow all of them or as many as I can. And I start to see the change in language, the change in focus. And that's a good barometer for me to say, you better get on this wagon while you still have the damn chance. Yeah. So I'm looking at competitor behavior, and that's a huge tipping point for me and a huge trigger for me to get my shit together and to start to jump into the ring. And again, if you start losing market share because of that, again, that's another trigger. So, lack of sales, lack of customers, Peter says, that could be a huge tipping point for me to make an investment on the larger side to keep it moving. Right. But what a great question by Bob. So the next thing that I really want you guys to start focusing in on is anticipating buyer location. So it's another way of saying, where is your audience hanging out? Like if you're not listening to podcasts, if you're not on podcasts, right? Especially if your audience consumes them, that's gonna bite you in the ass later on for sure. A lot of our clients in the next 5 to 7 years, where do you think they're going to be? They're going to be in this metaverse. They're going to be inside the internet. And that was one of the best ways Web 3.0 is explained to me. Web 3.0 is basically the internet, but now you're able to be inside of it.
You're immersed.
I was like, man, that's a really easy way for me to understand that. Yeah. And I've been preaching this shit for years about the difference between you and everybody else that does what you do is the brand experience that your customers go through, right? So you have to keep that in mind. You have to keep that in mind moving forward. What kind of experience are you going to give them in this new playground, if you will? So customer experience, brand experience is going to be huge moving forward. And I want you guys to get the
time to think about.
Yeah. I want you guys to get ahead of this, because that's what's going to really make you stand out in your current industry, but it's really going to help you survive the next decade. Okay. Hit him with another one, Awais.
All right. So before I dive into the fourth one, so all these three, anticipating buyer needs, anticipating buyer behavior, anticipating buyer location. Think about that. This is what Henry and I talk about all the time. Like to tell us about your ideal client, getting clear on your ideal client, and so that formula doesn't change.
No.
And then follow up with that. Now, Henry talked about his Fiverr experience. Right. So how did he pivot from that? Primarily niching down, specialization. I would say I was the same way, right? Like I started out as a creative, and in order for me to scale, I had to do two things. One was, I got my processes straight, got a team together, and that was just part of it. It was just part of it because, yes, there's several creative agencies that are still out there, and that's all they do is just churn out design all day long. But today, not only have Fiverr, but now you have Canva, right? Now, right?
Yeah,
So
it's like the second generation, right?
exactly. Tomorrow, again, anticipate what changes are going to come. And so there's a possibility they're already testing out AI that will start designing. There's already AIs that they're not putting the best work out there,
Yep.
but again, like what you said earlier, is like your first version is never going to be the best version, right?
Nope.
But they're teaching these AIs to actually design. Sooner or later, they're going to start designing better than some of the human designers.
Yeah, with less error, right?
With less error in shorter
Right.
time. Well, what does that do to a business if they're strictly on creative design?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that's the shift that you have to anticipate. So when I anticipated shifts like these, like, okay, well, you know what? Let's have people pay for my thinking. Let's problem solve. Let's try to
Yeah.
figure out what's happening and what the overall impact is on my client's business performance through some of the creative work. And how do we get to that creative work? Is by identifying the ideal clients, by identifying who their competitors are, how they're different from their competitors, and what their strategic advantage is. All of those things, their core values, addressing all of that and using that to inform the visual identity.
It's funny.
And
Some strategy is just timeless, right?
yeah,
It's all gonna, like, until the end of time. I think that's what it's gonna come down to. It's really understanding who it is that you're trying to serve and what they want,
exactly.
what they need. Like, that should be your pillar strategy right there.
That's right.
And now you could get creative and savvy with tech on how you figure all that out and serve them.
Exactly.
But that's never going to go away. Here, Olio has a great question. I have a small nonprofit that deals with health and well-being for marginalized groups. How can we adapt to be part of the new way forward in business? It's a tough answer. I mean, it's a tough question to answer right out of the gate. I would need probably some time to think about that. And I would need to obviously ask you some follow-up questions in regards to your mission is, what your vision is, what the purpose of this nonprofit is, for in more detail. But let me give you an example real quick before I forget on how I personally dive into industry change. So when I saw this NFT thing hit the ground earlier this year, late last year, I was like, what in the hell is going on here? People selling looks like 8-bit design work,
Yeah.
right? Look like for like 60
JPEGs and
yeah, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, what in the world? And so what I did was I just literally went to YouTube, typed in NFT, and watched what popped up. And I started to see some of the industry leaders talking about it. And then I kept doing that search. And then I realized I had 10, 15 hours under my belt around the NFT concept. And now I would, again, there's so many people that know about NFTs more than I do, but at least I have an idea of what one is and how it's being used and the future of the market.
Yep.
And how and the what's the word? This is why I want to have Bob on, because he's neck deep into this stuff. How NFTs are being used in the concert industry, right, in the live event space, and he's going to blow your mind when he tells you how some of this stuff is how this stuff is being used. And who knows, 10 years from now, you probably won't have a ticket stub anymore. It'll just be an NFT, right? So that's what I do. I just hit the internet and go into search mode, learning mode, education mode, and try to teach myself this stuff as much as I can. where I'm enough to be dangerous with it, but by no means am I an expert. This way, my brain starts to go, oh, how could I leverage this, right? So people call it immersion. It's pretty similar to that. You know, that has worked really, really well for me in the past. So I would say give that a shot. Where you start to get overwhelmed is when you try to do a couple of those at the same time. Like if you want to learn about NFTs, then say, all right, I'm going to dedicate the next 50 hours, not in a row, but I will dedicate 50 hours to understanding NFTs. So you start your clock and you go watch videos for an hour about NFTs, and maybe you do it for 50 days straight.
Track and measure.
That's it. By the end of those 50 days, chances are you're going to know a shit ton about NFTs if you're disciplined enough.
It will accumulate. Yeah.
It will compound, right? It's very, very simple. All right. We're running out of time here, so I want to make sure we start to wrap up. So specializing and niching down is something that's really, really important moving forward, right? So at the end of the day, here's the big question for you guys. Are you the consumer or are you the creator? All right. There's going to be a time where you're going to have to consume. This is what I just spoke about. But now what are you going to do with that knowledge? And that's where you have to create. You have to. Otherwise, that water's going to come up. It's going to get up to your, and then over your head. And then eventually it's going to get too deep and you're not going to be able to swim out. I've seen it over and over and over again. Okay. So Oasis, give them that second part.
Yeah, businesses always have to think from a creative perspective. And that doesn't mean that every single business, you know, again, we're the ones that are approached for being creative, but think about it from a problem solving perspective. That's what I mean. Creative thinking. That's what entrepreneurs are, right? So think about it from a problem solving perspective. And this ties into the previous point where, you know, again, be the creator, not the consumer as a business.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're creating a product or a service, whatever that looks like now, if we're going to speculate about where things are going to move to in Metaverse, focus more on, again, anticipating the needs, the behaviors, the location of your buyers, and that will inform you on what to create for them.
Yeah.
And then you can turn around and brand it, market it, right? On Saturday, it was on Friday. I was telling Henry, I was like, hey, Henry, one of my friends just sent me this and they told me I was like, a lot of this stuff still sounds foreign to me.
Yep.
And it was like, yeah, Adidas rolling out something and you just have to go and enter into it and buy it with Ethereum or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So I go on the main page before you enter into it, and I notice a pattern. And it's basically all of these 3 or 4 different brands that are rolling out these products, and they have a story tied to each one of them. Like, that's an opportunity for agencies like ours to get into and just say, hey, look, we can brand your NFT. We can brand your next rollout, your next NFT launch. Mm-hmm. There's anticipation being created around that.
Yes.
So for us, for me and Henry, it's, we're looking at it as an opportunity. Yes, there's a threat. It serves as a threat at the beginning because we are unfamiliar with it.
And it's how we framed it.
Exactly. But then we
framed it as a threat.
Exactly. But it's only temporary for as long as we don't act and we don't know and we don't educate ourselves.
Yes.
The minute we educate ourselves and refine our thinking, it now becomes an opportunity.
Amen. And embracing that change is huge. And to wrap this up in a nice bow is this. At the end of the day, guys, you got to welcome the future with anticipation, not apprehension. Listen, I'll be the first to tell you over a glass of wine or a glass of scotch that I could get real cynical real quick and real skeptical real quick. And it's not until I get over that hump that I realize the future is bright and we should be so happy that we have the tech that we have today and the resources we have today to create pretty much anything we want
from the palm of our hands.
Yeah.
It's literally
again, attitude is everything. I saw this meme the other day. I saw this cartoon on Instagram, and it said everything is changing, and it was two kids in a train, right, in a train car, and on one side of the train car there was a quote above the kid's head, and it said everything is changing, and the kid was all depressed and crying and looking out the window all sad. And then on the other side of the train car was the same quote above another kid's head that said, everything is changing. And everything was sunny and he was smiling and he was all excited and he was looking ahead. And I said, man, what a powerful image. And I want you guys to think about that as we wrap up. Everything is changing. Is your attitude? That's my question for you, because that's what's going to take you to that next level, keep you relevant, keep you ahead of the curve, and keep you in business. So I say we end it there. Appreciate all of you guys. Again, if you need help with this stuff, book that brand assessment. It's the first step of my process to helping you brand for a bigger and better tomorrow. It's number one. Number two, Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, we're going to do another live stream, and it's going to be all about what we've learned, Oasis and I, over the past year and what we're doing to gear up for 2022. So have an amazing day, guys. I appreciate all of you guys, Olio and Peter and Amy and Bob, all of you guys for joining us today. And we will catch you on Wednesday. Talk to you soon.